I'm a great advocate for scientific debate and argument. There's just not enough of it these days. In our politically correct woke world, people feel very challenged when you challenge their ideas. They think that you're attacking them personally, and they take this to heart, and they may even take you to court over it. So it is become quite difficult in many environments to actually have what I would call a good argument. So people shy away from that. And if you look at the history of science, it's been through scientific arguments. It's often been two or three players at a juncture in time who are arguing against each other.
Tim Craske has opinions about how we all work together in this industry, and he's not afraid to share them. In this chat, Tim and I talk about the scientific argument and, well, how people have lost the art of respectfully disagreeing with each other in the field of science and geology. We discussed the shift of the scientific training ground to places like China and what that means for discovery. Was it all better in the past, and are we just grumpy and cynical men yelling at clouds, or is there something to say for reviving that old way of doing science and exploration? And for someone who's seen a good bit of the industry and worked high up in the geological food chain, is there something that he sees around him today that truly inspires him? Tim isn't sitting still and complaining about what once was. He's passionate about the mentoring program that he started, trying to impart a new generation of geologists with a bit of wisdom. So in this conversation about standing up, not being afraid to share opinions, and anti-dogma, I give you Tim Craske.
Hey, look, I think I've got my WMC bingo card full now by the sounds of it, because I did chat to Steve yesterday. And
yes.
What an interesting conversation, right? He and I don't know how we never sailed into each other, but he's got opinions. That man. It was a really entertaining conversation.
He's really good. As you probably know, I've been running a discovery workshop in Perth for the last 8 years, and he's a regular speaker at that. And people always ask for Steve to come along. He's a great orator, and as you say, he likes to get straight into it and get people thinking, and that's great.
Yeah, and well, I asked John this question as well. I'm sorry to raise the poor man again, but what was in the water in those days? You know, what was the WMC special sauce? Is there a DNA thing, or is it just luck and timing? What is it all about?
I think WMC was the unique beast in the unique time. When I joined them in 1981, it was the end of the nickel boom, and it was interesting that the culture that Roy Woodall stood for, being a Catholic and being a family man with 10 kids, and other people in the organization also having lots of children. He very much cared for people and then wanted them to excel, and that spread all the way through to his encouragement of people to go and do higher degrees with company assistance. But in 1982, after the nickel crash and before the gold boom, essentially Western mining was bust. I mean, they weren't making any money, and so exploration division was put on a pay freeze, which lasted for 2 years. And for someone like myself who'd only just joined, meant that my spending capacity, because we're talking about the early 1980s, was going backwards. But at the end of that pay freeze, he gave everybody a $5,000 bonus. Wow. And nobody was made redundant. Yeah. And so that was part and parcel. People felt that they belonged somewhere, and yes. And Roy had a unique way of challenging people. I mean, he was a hard taskmaster, like a lot of great leaders. He didn't suffer fools gladly, but he certainly wanted to have a broad church of talent. And, that's something that I stepped right into and stayed around with for 20 years.
Right.
So,
Yeah, nice. And if you look around you now, I mean, can you see companies where that still lives?
I don't think so. I I know that John Van was trying to recreate some of that in Anglo-American after he became the chief geologist, effectively, and chief geoscientist for that group. But it was a moment in time. That's my belief. It's something that also you have to bear in mind took decades to build. And like a lot of things like trust, it took moments to destroy. And, that's a sad reality of when people don't realize what the value of a culture is. And this happens again and again with takeovers.
Sure.
WMC culture was effectively destroyed by BHP, and so everybody left, and everybody is now running junior companies or being consultants in the system, and the culture is still there. I mean, this is something that I've covered in a power map of geoscience for Australia, is that actually the ghost of WMC is more powerful than some living cultures.
Right.
So, and equally the ghost of CRA and the ghost of geopolitical and those groups. So some of the things that happened in over years within those organizations still live on, whereas other cultures come and go ephemerally and have no impact long term.
But there's got to be something on the other side as well, right? And because, you do get trapped into this, it used to all be better back then kind of rhetoric, which is also not quite the right angle to this sort of stuff. I'm sure there are things now that make up for that. And I'm not sure if I'm asking a rhetorical question, but I'm sure you're seeing stuff around you where, because I try to, because I share some of those thoughts, because I'm genuinely quite impressed by the people that come from that era that you speak to, and how well-rounded they are and how much they've seen, and, that's incubated somewhere. So, that's something that I've always aspired to create myself, I guess, by looking at those people and trying to take a little bit out of that and trying to recreate that. But, things change, cultures change, societies change, and we probably have some other special source there that in another 40 years from now is going to be regarded as a ghost to something that was. Is there something now that you can see that is really inspiring you in terms of how we run things or how we handle things as an industry?
I wish I could answer an emphatic yes, but I recently was invited to Natural History Museum Zircam's Open Day to give a keynote on challenges for the mining industry and for exploration in particular. And whilst there's definitely some good news out there, there's also a lot of real wicked problems that we currently have, like the closure of geology courses, the fact that in Australia you cannot do a honours degree in geophysics. There is no such course anymore. The fact that China produces 100 times more geoscience graduates than everybody else.
Statistics.
You're looking at 10,000 graduates a year in geoscience. So, it's hardly surprising we're seeing so many papers being published that are authored by Chinese academics and students. And that's only the beginning. Then you get the fact that there seems to be no, in my mind, long-term strategy in most organizations, and that's not unique to the mining industry. It's a global phenomenon.
Sure.
And I think where we came in when you originally asked me to appear on a podcast with you was my comments about strategy, and the real problem is that all the strategy sessions I sat in when I was embedded in the industry were not strategy sessions. They were planning sessions. They only looked 2, maybe 5 years out, but that's not the future. The future is 10, 15, 20 years out. And a lot of the things that people are feeling at the moment that I'm working is because of this short-term vision of what the future might be. And you can only envision the future by imagining it. If you start from having a presentation by the CFO and one by the CEO telling you how things are, you've already anchored the whole meeting in the present and or the past, and that's irrelevant.
So if
in 5 years' time.
So I do recall that strategy angle, and for those listening in regularly, I've covered this a few times, right? And I've asked people such as yourselves, what do you see around these board tables happening in the strategy space? Because it should all be about strategy, but it's not. And then it really comes, then you really need to ask yourself, well, first, I think strategy is completely misunderstood and misrepresented as well. And I think you've just basically said the same thing. But is strategy just a reaction of because people sitting around a board table, I've said this before, these are not, you don't go to the school of being a board director. You can do an MBA, and that somehow makes you a special person, I guess, to sit at a board table, right? Even though you might not have a hell of a lot of practical experience. Where does a person really get that feel for strategy, right? If it isn't out of a book and out of a course, it's almost something that you have to learn by doing and by mentors and by being around people who know it. But if we're then stuck into this cycle of sort of regression to the mean, and the WMCs of the days I know more, where there perhaps were long-term strategies. So binding it into a question, can we get out of this mess? And is it because we just don't understand strategy, or that we're just not educated in it, or we just don't have the right people in these positions?
I think fundamentally, most boards don't know anything about strategy, which is a sad thing. They may have MBAs, they may go to Harvard, but strategy is a completely different way of doing business than management. You really have to be able to look into the future, and you can't do that if you're trying to control the future. And this is the problem. Most people who get into executive positions are, control freaks. They want to have some sort of certainty, so they constantly try to manage the future as if it's risk and uncertainty instead of opportunity.
So,
and
go on.
And that's a fundamental mindset shift that they need to go through. If you're managing the future as something that's uncertain and risky, then you're not looking for the opportunities that those risks bring with them. If you do a SWOT analysis, just say, the key thing that nobody looks at is the T, the threats. If you can find a solution to a threat, you have a disruptive technology.
But so
it goes right across the
I like
industry.
that, and I think as I'm listening to that, I've thought about it in similar lines, perhaps coming from a different angle. I've always advocated more for, let's just call it, a more entrepreneurial spirit around board tables, because a lot of the very classic board directors and managing risk, the finance sheets, all the transactional nature of the day-to-day business activities and signing off on the budgets and blah blah blah. The few boards that I've hung around and not for, they're full with good people and absolutely I don't want to get myself in trouble here, but you need almost like a Muskian style, let's fly to Mars philosophy to this, to try to bring first a vision and then match a long-term strategy to that, to kind of steer the entire thing. And then the administrators and the bureaucrats can do their thing, I guess. So maybe a more romantic way of running companies, with actually still having passion and dreams to drive a strategy. Rather than yes, we're an exploration company. And I said this to somebody on the channel months ago, what's your vision? We're going to find ore bodies. And I talked to Steve about this yesterday. That hasn't come out obviously yet, but what's your, we want to find ore bodies. Yeah, it's just you and everybody else, So what's your strategy, and how are you going to be different in that? That's not easy to do.
No, I mean you raised some interesting points. Then my thoughts about what you just said is that if we're looking at exploration, so let's just look at that and think well. We pretty much know that we're going to be using variations of current technology for the next 5 years. So technology is not going to change or revolutionize exploration. But you can change minds in an instant, and with a different mindset and different perspective, a different paradigm on how exploration can be done and what exploration means, you've changed everything. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. If you make exploration also about geometallurgy, then all of a sudden a new search space is a new way of processing some unprocessable ore body or type. For example, if you look back in time, the very, very fine-grained base metal deposits like McArthur River, HYC, which were considered, unprocessable because of the fine-grained nature of the mineralization. Once that was solved, that style of deposit becomes a deposit again. But prior to that, it's an occurrence, certainly not a resource. So those are the sort of things, taking a different viewpoint. And this is something I again try to emphasize people. Paradigm shifting is the number one approach to exploration that we all need to get into. Is doing the same thing that we've always done is just going to get us where we are today, which is declining discovery rates.
So if so listening to that and having spoken to people who have fairly similar ideas to this, right? And we run at the risk of being a bit of an echo chamber, listening to each other complain about that exact thing. How do you think, what is the right platform to get that thinking out there and not outside our little room of similar thinkers, right? I mean, we're chatting on a channel now that has maybe 1,000 people subscribing to it, so a few people will listen to this, right? But how do you seek, having gone through quite an impressive career and working in the top end of things, do you feel like, you've got something to say to the world on that? And do you think people should listen, and how should they listen to it? How do you personally look at bringing that message out there that we need to do this better?
Okay. Well, probably two directions. So the first direction would be bottom up. So we need to take people who have the ability to do this sort of thing and to mentor and nurture them. And that is something I don't believe is really happening in many organizations at the moment in our industry. Yes, people have mentors, but in general, the focus is on technical mentoring, not on discovery mentoring, what it takes to make a discovery. I recently made a statement, when I was at Natural History Museum, I said, everybody in the room has enough geological knowledge to make a discovery. And I based that on the basis that many discoveries are made by people in their late 20s. So you don't have to have a PhD, you don't have to have got 20 years experience in the industry. If you're in the right project at the right time with the right backing, you are in a position to make a discovery. So that's not what's holding people back. What's holding people back is their belief that they can do it.
Okay.
And for that, you need somebody strong who can say, I am your mentor, I'm your sponsor, I believe in you, and I'm going to let you be successful. And I don't need any credit for this. I just want to see the whole industry be successful.
I was included in an email that you sent last year, I think, on his mentorship program that I think you were suggesting, and I don't know where it's gotten to, whether it actually worked, and did you get anywhere with this? Because having been involved with a few of these programs, I've got my opinions on why they don't work, but I was watching the email traffic, and I saw one brilliant person that you CC'd after the other sort of kindly declining because they're busy people, and there's not a lot of these people around, and committing to a mentorship role, if you want to do it right, is not just an hour every month, right? So so question one, did it actually work, and where is it now? And if yes, then why? And if no, then why not?
Okay, so first good news, it's very much alive. So the program that I've set up in Perth, which has been called the Mawson Discovery Mentoring Program, has 14 mentors and mentees paired up, and we're currently run a number of workshops, but it's effectively that will go for 12 months. And then when I was at the Natural History Museum, I announced the Charles Darwin Discovery Mentoring Program, which will be run at Natural History Museum, and that will start in December this year and cover not only people in the UK, but also the Northern Hemisphere. So I already have somebody who's signed up from Spain who wants to join that particular group. And so we'll be running these 6-month offsets. And with that coverage, hopefully that'll cover enough people that'll make a difference. So what I'm hoping for is that we'll have, somewhere between 25 to 40 people every year going through this program. We have no money at the moment. The mentees are paying $1,000 each to have some skin in the game, but effectively what they're getting for that is probably $30,000 worth of value, because the mentors don't get paid. They provide their services for free, and I organize the training, and all the people who do the training and run the workshops and the networking sessions, that's all provided for free. And the money that the mentees were paid, we give back to them in catering, discounts to conferences, and if there's any money left over, we'll put it into a travel bursary fund to cover over into the next year. So this is not about making money. This is about making a difference, and that's the concept. And it seems to have captured the imagination of enough people to make it go.
Well, I think that's great, because I there've been some heated debates on whether these things should be charged for, because I remember the AusMM runs a similar program, and I think they also charge around $1,000 to mentees, and you call it skin in the game, and that's probably all from the same angle. I think if you make it free, which I think the AIG used to do, and I think
they still do,
they still do, and it does make it difficult because people don't show up, and as a mentor, then you sit there waiting for your mentee to show up because there isn't that commitment, because they haven't made that payment. So I think I think charging some modest amount of money for that creates commitment on both sides, I think. So I would. I think that's a smart thing to do. And I didn't know that it was actually that successful already. So I'll put a link in the video here in the description, so for people who are watching to see. The Perth cohort for this coming year is now closed because we need to get going with the program. But the one in London will open in October, November for a pre-Christmas kickoff, and then we'll take it from there. If we can get those going, possibly a third one we could run might be in Vancouver or Toronto in order to cover the Americas. But it's really about making a difference. And what I was told by a lot of people, this won't work. Right. You won't get anybody. Nobody's going to sign up for 12 months. What about the field season? What about this? And this is the thing that if you go back to your comment about, how do entrepreneurs like Musk and Bezos and formerly Steve Jobs do what they did? Well, they didn't bother asking anybody permission. And they didn't bother asking where the money was coming from. They just started. And they did it. No, it's not.
And that's the philosophy that I've taken now is that I recently turned 65, and I want to make sure that this has an effect in my lifetime. And I strongly believe that with the focus on discovery rather than the higher levels of geoscience, the focus on people and taking people with the right stuff through programs like this, is that some of these people will make discoveries within 2 years. And that's the aim of that will be the feedback that we're looking for, is that actually this will have a difference. And if we're not seeing that in a couple of years' time, then we'll have to adjust the program, because it should. There's no reason. When you make a paradigm shift, my experience has been you will make a discovery or an invention or start a new business within 2 years.
2 years. That's a pretty short runway. You're giving yourself a pretty high target there, man.
I am, because there's no reason why you can't. And let me give you an example. My experience working for 4 years in the Eastern Succession at Mount Isa, Mount Cloncurry, and we were unsuccessful for 4 years because we were focusing very much on the outcropping geology there. Once we, Mike Webb, geophysicist, and myself sat down and looked north of Cloncurry at the very significant magnetic features north of Cloncurry that nobody had really looked at all prior to that. That paradigm shift of shifting to deliberately explore undercover and to deliberately look where nobody had looked before, that paradigm shift resulted in the discovery of Ernest Henry 18 months later.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So it works. I hear you. But these are ambitious things. But that's what I guess entrepreneurs need to set, ambitious targets. So I think that's using that word paradigm shift, right? What are you seeing around you in the industry that you are really excited about, whether it's a paradigm shift or not? But let's focus on the good for a bit, right? Because it's so easy to pick on things, and yes, we're running out of geologists, and China has 10,000 a year coming out, and all that sort of stuff. And I share all those thoughts, but I always want to try. There must be something out there that you think, shit, this is genuinely exciting. I'm following this on a weekly basis, and I want to know more about this. What's on your hit list? What are you watching at the moment? What trends, and what are things that you're excited about?
Well, excitement is. It's difficult when you get to my age and you go, well, what's really exciting you, Tim? But I will say this. So one thing is cheap, rapid, and very granular dating of mineralization in systems. Many of us have completely the wrong idea about how mineral systems actually work and the sort of timeframes that they work on. Some of these deposits are formed in days, not millions of years. The actual end point of a system when it actually forms the ore body is often very, very rapid. And from that perspective, appealing to things which are long-term effects doesn't work. Everything is coming together at a certain point in time because the system is ready. So an example of that would be something like the tin veins in Cornwall. Those tin granites were enclosed in a metamorphic cap, effectively like a pressure cooker, called the Killis, which was a sedimentary argillite that was cooked into a ceramic. And eventually, of course, the ceramic lid cracked. But it wasn't some special thing that happened. It was just the next thing. When the pressure cooker was ready, when the casserole was cooked, as it were, the next thing that cracked then shot a whole series of veins. And you can tell these things came out very rapidly because they were all orientated in the same direction. And they probably came out like shotguns in seconds.
So are you saying that, there is a new way people are thinking about this, and it's rapidly changing in terms of the acceptance of these kind of philosophies? Is that what you're saying, or is there? Because it sounds like you're saying there's still a bit of contention, and we see enough contention about systems that we had talks about the Witwatersrand Basin here the other day, right, on how those were formed, and you think, shit, certainly we figured that one out, and there's even discussions on VMSs. Dare I say it? No, I've done it, right? So. Where I'm going with that one. So is that where do you see that we are now suddenly we have a tool now to find alignment, or what were you meaning by that?
Well, this is like, I guess the physicists hoping that there's going to be a single unified theory that will bring quantum mechanics and Einstein's relativity all into a single, understandable and relatable, simple equation like E equals mc squared, and we'll all go, well, that's it. We now understand the universe.
Yes.
And I don't see that as happening in my lifetime. So, but what I will say is that if you look at what we're seeing in a number of deposits, and I was really happy to bump into Jerry Dunger, who did his PhD on Optedi. They're now finding styles of deposits there, including the New York breccia, which is the latest deposit there, completely blind breccia pipe. Mm-hmm. And if you actually add up all the different sorts of deposits in that overall deposit, you might think of it as a camp of deposits, really, that we just call a single deposit. But there are something like 5 or 6 different styles of mineralization, each one being an ore body in its own right. Mm-hmm. And I think that is something that we need to think about quite a lot. If you look at Grasberg and Erzberg, one's a skarn, the other's a porphyry. You get a whole series of different styles just within a single system. And depending on the host rocks and the rheology and a whole lot of other things, you will get multiple deposits.
So should there be? So are there researchers there that you're very carefully following who are pushing the envelope in that space, right? Because are there research labs, be they from wherever, Australia or overseas, that are active in this space and are actually moving the needle on some of these things? And you said you're 65. Are you following that stuff? Do you get your articles in, and do you stay on top of that?
I think I'll answer that in this way. During my lifetime, I've seen far too many individual studies on individual deposits with no relationship to the surrounding geology. So back in the 1980s even, people were going to a university to do PhDs, and that included a large amount of mapping. So if we look, for example, at the PhD that was done on green bushes, there's a huge component of geological mapping of the region, as well as work in the lab. Well, now we've migrated into a sort of era where it's all about the lab work. And in fact, sometimes the person hasn't even collected the sample in which they're doing the work.
Sure.
So they don't even personally have the context of where that sample came from. They're just given it by a supervisor or by a co-worker or somebody who feels that they're doing something good for this process. So I think that's where we need to go back to. We want a modern look at the environments in which deposits form. If we only sit inside the system, it's very difficult. It's like sitting inside a tree or a cabbage trying to work out what's going on around you. And the interesting thing about being inside a tree or a cabbage is my favorite one, is everything around you isn't a cabbage. It's open air and soil and sunshine. It's completely different to the cabbage. And this is the same for mineral deposits. If you're inside the mineral deposit, you're not seeing the environment that it was grown in at all. You're seeing the process. You're overwhelmed by the by the high energy, fast moving environment, which was the ore system before it all froze. Yeah. And so you cannot understand, I don't think, mineral systems by simply studying mineral deposits. You must put the effort into looking into the camp scale environment to which these things
I mean, can't disagree with that, but I'm just genuinely wondering, with that sort of decline of students and probably the pressure is now on shorter PhD programs, cheaper PhD programs, less field-based ones, right, where less samples or whatever equation there would flow. It's going to become harder and harder. And where I was going with that question is more like who is then. I mean, if it, for instance, subdues in Australia because we get less funding and there's less funding for research available, all that sort of stuff that we've covered for years now, then that must shift to either another jurisdiction or right where that research is happening. Because again, if China's pumping out 10,000 geology students, surely there must be some groundbreaking research coming out of that around these mineral systems, right? And there must be new stuff that you are, again, genuinely excited about seeing. Because I can hear what you're saying, we need to think about it in a certain way, but that wasn't necessarily the question. It's like, who is thinking in that way? Yeah. And should we support that more? Should we focus on that more? Should we look less to our Australian, castles of academic beauty and accept that some of this new thinking is coming from overseas? At some point.
Well, I think you're right. There is a revolution sort of happening already in Australia, along with the closure of geology departments. It's a reality check that you can't encourage students to study things for which they can't see the value in themselves personally. Whereas in, say, China, it's a much more of a socialist command economy, and people are told what to do. And this is similar to what the Soviets used to do. And when I say the Soviets, I don't mean the Russians, I mean the Soviet Union, is that they had armies of people going out to do exploration. Yeah. It was like being in the army. They had field camps, they had hundreds of people, they had, they were funded with drilling, whatever was needed to explore an area to realize its mineral potential. If there was such, now whether it was well guided, whether the concepts that led that were well focused is another question. But the sheer weight of numbers was a good thing. And this is similar. If do we take a metaphor or analogy in China? Virtually all the recent new dinosaurs and information about that era of Earth's history has been coming out of China recently. If you hear of a new dinosaur that's been discovered, it's in China, because there's simply so many people working there on the subject. So weight of numbers will make up for good ideas. It's like the difference between detective exploration, where you simply blanket sample an area and then drill it out, or do stratigraphic drilling and then move to more focused or discovery drilling, versus having a concept that leads you straight to an anomaly that becomes the discovery. Those are two very, very different things, and either will get you there. But in the Western world, we don't have the ability to be able to do the former, whereas in socialist systems, they can. And people are not paid that much, so you don't have the outrageous salaries and compensation packages that people expect to go and work in the field here in Australia.
No, that's fair enough. Just thinking back to what you said before, when you mentioned the Einstein thing, and did you get into the whole geometric unity philosophy as well around that, or did you end up reading more into that? Because I mean, it's way above my pay scale, but
when mine too, I think
you triggered something that there are people out there talking about that, and the reason I sort of bring that back, and I was sort of humming and hawing about it, but what I'm fascinated about, sort of, you're 65, I'm 47. I'm working through this industry, picking up things that I never thought would be contentious. And the more I see, the more people I speak to, the disagreements at the highest levels on almost every subject are just fascinating me. Right? We still can't agree on just about anything, and whether it's indeed the origin of a VMS deposit, or whether the tin veins are created in 3 days or 10,000 days or 10,000 years for that matter, or 100,000 years, or whether it's in the resource estimation space and so on. I'm fascinated by that. And when you said the various physics theories about quantum mechanics that I obviously never understand, but I watch plenty of YouTube and I doom scroll my way through life, as I'm sure many of our viewers do. You think about that and you go, no, people also do not agree about this at the highest level, and that really intrigues me. So I don't know if that's a question more than anything, but maybe, is that your experience as well? And why in your field? Because we have different skill sets. I think. I mean, I got far more drawn into the sort of as a resource geologist, I play with data quality and resource models more than I deal with mineral systems these days. But why are we so? Why can't we align on these damn things, right? And is that just because we're because it's actually healthy to disagree on it, and perhaps that's now leading you a little bit. I'm leading the witness here,
yeah.
But
Yes.
Because take that VMS debate. And not to touch on that necessarily, right? Because it isn't necessarily a debate, but I like these. And because with the theory of geometric unity, I was going to go to this Eric Weinstein, who is quite a prolific commentator and a smart guy. But apparently, if you listen into this a little bit, it can be debunked quite consistently. And then I get thinking, okay, well, this is clearly a person that is 10 times more intelligent than I'll ever be in my dreams. And there's other people in our industry that I would classify like that. But then they come up with these weird things. Do we need those strange outlying people to keep driving us into weird places so that we keep challenging ourselves? Is it actually good for debate, or is that constant misalignment just noise that keeps us from actually discovering new deposits? It's there. I formulated my question. Took me a while, but I got there.
Okay. Well, I'm a great advocate for scientific debate and argument. There's just not enough of it these days. In our politically correct woke world, people feel very challenged when you challenge their ideas. They think that you're attacking them personally, and they take this to heart, and they may even take you to court over it. So it is become quite difficult in many environments to actually have what I would call a good argument. So people shy away from that. And if you look at the history of science, it's been through scientific arguments. It's often been 2 or 3 players at a juncture in time who are arguing against each other. If you look back at the debates between Tesla and other people in the electrical field back at that same time, and Tesla was an advocate for alternating current, and the others wanted direct current. And those were 2 alternatives, but Tesla was right. And that's what worked out in the end. Similarly, the arguments in science, even condemnation in science, if you look at the way Galileo is treated by the church, if you look at the way that Darwin, with his theories of evolution, was treated by the Anglican Church, these people were pilloried, but that was what made them stronger. That's what gave them the resilience, and at the end of the day, that's what made them famous, because they stood up to the naysayers and the dogma, and they said, no, I don't see the world that way, and by the way, I've got scientific evidence to show that an alternative way of viewing things may be the case. So we need to encourage argument, and this needs to be started at school level.
Yeah, but
we
it's
need
hard to do in the
scientific
social
debate.
No, we do, but it's so hard to do in a social media world where, you know, you can get bullied around everywhere, right? And you see it happening. And I do genuinely feel for people who are trying to stick their neck out scientifically, are not, you know, that they have their opinions, but that just get crucified for it. But on the other side, I also see some very good dialogue. And I literally just randomly saw a post by Brett Davies on another kilometer or chronometer, I guess, thing that keeps spinning around, and some person had made some observations, and he I think in a very nice way said, look, you know, thanks for your contributions to this debate on structural measurements of drill core, et cetera, et cetera. However, there is this piece of, you know, work that has been quite public that shows you that these measurements are, you know, that's good discourse, I guess, and it leaves everybody in their, you know, in their place. But some of these discussions, geez, you know, and that I know how it has affected people. So yeah, and so I wonder. So we do need them, and I'm actually, you know, a strong supporter of them. But by just being a vocal and outspoken supporter by yourself, you can get crucified as well. I mean, and now we're getting into the whole people in politics space that I guess we should not go. But your point is well made. We should have more of it. And back to the days where we could still stand up and respectfully say, I disagree with that position, and present your arguments.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I have been told I have a reputation for telling people that they're wrong, or that pointing out things which are wrong in other people's work, which is something that I have a tendency to do. But if you're going to do that, you then have to lead people in another direction and say, well, this is what I believe to be right, and these are the correct. So just labeling other people's work as wrong or unhelpful or whatever, well, that's only half the story. So if you believe that, you must go the extra mile and actually create an alternative that people can pick up instead. Otherwise, what you're leaving them with is nothing, and that's very uncomfortable for most people. But we have, in this modern world, getting back to some points you made earlier in the discussion, is I'm very positive about some of the things that we have. I'm very optimistic about the future, and I think whether you or I are involved in, you know, quietly prodding that in any particular direction is perhaps almost irrelevant, because the future will happen anyway. But if you can be influential, if you can influence anything, and to have a legacy going into the future, you've got to deal with people, and you've got to deal with people who are younger than yourself, who are going to be around to actually carry that through, or to remember what you said in the podcast back in 2025 and go, this was raised in a discussion on a podcast back in 2025, and what did we do about it? Where did it lead to? So as long as things get recorded, you know, in former days it was all about publishing peer-reviewed papers. I'm not sure that's something I would subscribe to. I've always avoided that, because I felt that once you publish, you're dead, because you then have to defend what you published. The unfortunate thing I've also had pointed out to me, that unless you publish something, then you will constantly get these ideas which you are criticizing repeated ad infinitum, because nobody's actually standing up in what's considered a scientific way to actually challenge the status quo and to put an alternative in place. So that's possibly where I have to now go next, as I focus more into semi-retirement and real retirement, of actually writing some of this stuff up and getting it out there so that people can make up their own minds, but at least it's recorded and people can reflect on it and hopefully use it. So
no, I look forward to seeing that and reading it if and when it does come out. You know, I could probably go a few different directions with some of the things you just mentioned as well, but maybe a nice place to leave it. Any other thoughts on your mind that burning issues or things that you see out there that are worth mentioning?
Yeah, I think I'd jump onto something that Steve Beresford and I spoke about a year ago, and that's complacency. Mm-hmm. There's far too much complacency out there in our industry. People think that everything's going to be right. We just have to hang on, wait for the next upswing in a commodity price or whatever it might be. And I don't believe that. Okay. So the reason why, so let's go into that a little bit. Mm-hmm. Nickel. Everybody said nickel would come back in a couple of years, things would change. It hasn't. Lithium. I don't see lithium prices coming back to where they were in real sense.
Okay.
Either. The market has changed. We have oversupply. And so things can be hard to swallow, because people believe that the future is going to be like the past. Well, I no longer believe that. We're at a point where things are changing so rapidly with the energy transition and global geopolitics, and China is going to be the leading economy in the world going forward, not the US. And after that, it's going to be the rise of Africa, when that's where all the population is going to, the growth in the world is going to be. So these are things that we really have to think about. What are the implications of these big picture things that we know are going to happen? Pretty much guarantee they're going to. These are not uncertainties.
No. I mean, these are definitely things that are happening, and I think that as a human race, we absolutely suck at understanding what we're in, right? We live day to day. Our problems are day to day problems. I mean, it's the whole climate change philosophy of, it's not happening to you now, and it's just very difficult for people to comprehend what's going on around them at such a time scale. So that probably leads to that complacency, right? It's just, and I did talk to Steve about this and Scott yesterday in the podcast that will probably launch before this one. So for those people listening to this one thing that he said that stuck with me is that, and I'm probably paraphrasing incorrectly, but the fact that the macroeconomics do not drive the decision making here, but that kind of conflicts with what you're saying here. I mean, you're saying, look, we have to look at what's going around as geopolitics and all the rest of it. And his argument was something along the like of, these discoveries that we're not making are perhaps because we're too focused on the macroeconomics. The macroeconomics don't actually make a difference. Talking about nickel price or lithium prices, if you want to make a discovery, those are not the driving forces. Is that something that you discuss between yourselves as well? And that is there perhaps a reason why we need to have a conversation with both of you at the same time?
I think as perhaps putting my futurist hat on, is that we're looking at different timescales here. So I'm talking about, in the geopolitical world, I'm not talking about, what happens in Gaza today, or what happens in Iran today, or what happens in the Ukraine today, or what happens in Trump's office today. These are, I'm talking about looking out 50 years, looking to the end of the century, looking towards peak population on planet Earth. These are things that are all going to happen this century. Any effects of climate change are going to happen this century. I went to a talk actually at the Gold Conference, Gold 24, where Pierre Guy said it's already too late for copper discovery, because if anything discovered today will take 15 years to get into production, by which time the energy transition will be over. And that's just a reality check. Don't worry about finding the next Escondida for that reason, because it's not going to appear in the right time frame.
Sure. No, but I don't think anybody.
Time frames are really, really important. So these things are all real. People accept them, but when they become, it's going to be 50 years from now, it's going to be 30 years from now, people switch off. They're not interested.
Well, I don't think it even matters, right? I mean, I don't think that drives exploration. I mean, if supply and demand, if we actually need more copper because we actually can't build the things that we actually want to build today, then somebody tomorrow will find more copper. It's just like when, to use China again, when COVID hit and they needed a hospital with 10,000 beds, 2 days later, there was a hospital with 10,000 beds. Right, and that's the necessity is the mother of all invention. So that's kind of where I'm not particularly worried about that's stifling our exploration drive necessarily. But again, to Steve's argument, the macroeconomics, you should be in the game of discovery because you want to be in the game of discovery, and not because you're watching some pendulum crystal ball interaction that gets you to think that in 25.3 years we need X amount of nickel to be on the market to solve whatever problem we have at that point in time. I think that's, and I think the pig population thing is also a myth that has been debunked some time ago, by various different people. So, and again, perhaps not a branch that we want to digress into either. But I think we're more or less saying the same thing here, but perhaps from slightly different angles. But
I think it all comes down to your time frame and vision, and the answers to the same question change when you say, well, what's going to happen in 15 years? What's going to happen in 30 years? What's it? Mm-hmm. And I do understand, well, people are focused on what I'm going to do tomorrow, what I'm going to do over the next 5 years of my career. There's much shorter time frames. Discovery is an opportunity to make a difference. And if you discover something that has potential economic value, it will be mined and it will make a difference to local economies and in some cases countries' economies. And so there'll be a whole lot of things which will be things which are non-geological, non-mining, non-resource management related that will come along and affect what happens. But in terms of drivers, mm-hmm. Self-drive is the drive you need. I agree with that. It's not about looking into crystal balls and judging what the gold price is going to be in 5 years' time. It's what is going to make you successful in this industry. What are you going to focus on that you have a talent for? And we've mentioned Steve Beresford. Steve is being successful currently because he's focusing on his talents. Mm-hmm. And this is something we emphasize in the mentoring program.
Okay.
Do a personal SWOT analysis. What are your key skills and strengths? And most people are more successful in life by focusing on their strengths. So what difference can you make, and where can you make it?
Yeah. No, that's very good advice. Tim, thanks so much for having the conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting me.
I hope we chat again. There's some really interesting topics that got me thinking. So
okay.
I might follow up with you on a couple of things, but thanks so much.
Happy to.
All right. See you again.
Okay. Thanks, René.